シャリンガンか。やっぱりこいつイタチの弟だぜ。オロチマルをやれたのもウチハの血のおかげってわけだ。血統に恵まれただけの勘違い野郎が。
元来ウチハ一族は万華鏡シャリンガンのために友と殺し合い、永遠の動力を得るために親兄弟で殺し合い、そうして力を誇示し続けてきた汚れた一族なのだ。その一族の中に生まれ落ちた時からお前もこの血塗られた運命に巻き込まれている。
Shinobi are tools. These tools become more precious with rarity, more desired, more sought after, more exploited. It's a mistake to say that these special powers allow one to thrive at the top of the hierarchy, because all lose in war. If shinobi are not tools for a group, an organization, a country, then they are tools for their own hatred, festering in the darkness that they propagate, sweeping others into the same void, until they eventually consume themselves with it. And if one does not have the privilege of being born with the ability to enact their wrath, then they can simply rob the power they require from someone else. But some find themselves even more fortunate than that, as is the case with Zabuza and Orochimaru. Haku died a splendid tool, not because he was sharp enough to defend the person he had always been tasked with protecting, but because the love he had for Zabuza was so boundless, it was worth sacrificing everything for. That love spawning from a place of comfort after only knowing discomfort for so long. The Kekkei Genkai Haku had was a detriment as far as he was concerned. It was only ever the opposite when Zabuza could put it to good use. A twisted love, one that was only reciprocated after the damage had already been done. Kimimaro could only fight, could only move because of his love for Orochimaru, the genetic power he wielded perpetually binding him down in a cage, trapping him in a violent solitude. It was only until Orochimaru decided to use him that he finally felt united with another. Yet Kimimaro himself acknowledged his own power as one that was not his, but entirely his master's. A tool at the mercy of another's manipulation, even at death's door. These individuals are never free to use their immense potential at their leisure. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite, as the baggage that comes with being special far outweighs the merit of these superior abilities. Tools in the shinobi world do not become sharper with ability alone, but with love. Love for violence, love for ascension, love for another, love for one's country, love for one's clan. Madara loved so much. It was that love that enabled him to do what many found impossible. And it was also that love that so easily twisted into contempt. And along with these feelings, power was always acquired. Tobirama voices his concerns on this very cycle, one that is synonymous with the Uchiha as a whole. He was wary of them not because of Madara, but because Madara was one of many. When one loves something so much, all the more hatred will spawn when that something is robbed from them. And with this transition into despair, immense power is found. For a race of people that feed off that despair in order to evolve, people like Tobirama who seek stability will only ever watch them with unease. Yet Tobirama himself cannot even see the hypocrisy in his own dogma, for he bears the burden of perpetuating a similar cycle of conflict. He was born inheriting Senju prowess, not only being a formidable powerhouse, but being equipped with the intelligence to create many things, the bulk of these creations lying in advanced ninjutsu. Jutsu he was inspired to create to defend his homeland. Yet, it is some of these same jutsu that eventually are used against the Leaf on more than one occasion. In keeping the same narrative of security for his beloved home in mind, he made the genetic gifts of the Uchiha an asset for the village to use at the clan's expense. This decision not performed out of malice, but out of love. Love for the foundations that his older brother built. Love for seeing those foundations mature and prosper into something greater. This love even worth laying down his life for. Not because it was necessary, but because he didn't want to risk the future of Konoha being compromised, a future he saw in Hiruzen. Everything Tobirama did was for the village, because he loved it. Yet some of these decisions to help protect what he loved created whole new disasters that later endanger it, as is the case with Uchiha's conflict with the Leaf. Madara had the foresight to see this event occur long before it did. He, much like Tobirama, also believed his clan to be cursed. But he also had the insight to look beyond where Tobirama could not, for he saw the qualities of the Uchiha in all shinobi. If human beings experience love, loss, and hatred in a perpetual cycle, this cycle breeding ceaseless conflict, then is it not true that the Uchiha are merely a heightened showcase of the very nature of humans? To reject their nature is to reject the nature of humanity. But so many, including the leader of the very land they resided in, did just that. Madara viewed this scrutiny not with more contempt, but with escapism, opting to ascend into being something beyond human, so that he could lead the accursed humans into a land that would be free of burden. A new burden of godhood was placed on Madara after using his ascended eyes to decode his perceived fate of the world. Even if it went against the very conflict he so reveled in, Madara would devote his life to ending it. And to do so, he acquired even greater sight. Those with the Rinnegan inevitably are bound to a code of godhood, a code compelling these characters to find a solution for the world. Nagato attempted this, Obito attempted this, Madara attempted this, and eventually Sasuke as well. The Rinnegan itself seemingly carries the will of its first user, that first user longing for a world of peace. He was the first to discover that peace comes with understanding, so he created a power that would aid in that understanding he so longed for. Yet his descendants mature this energy into something diametrically opposed to its intention, attempting to use this spoiled power to achieve that same peace the sage sought after, when all that ever transpires from it is inevitably destruction. The Rinnegan gives access to some of the most powerful ninjutsu in existence, yet, with users only ever attempting to find a road that would more align with ninshu, what utility does this Kekkei Genkai actually pose for the betterment of their path? Nagato's story portrays this idea with a glaring affirmation. He longed to use his inherent potential to protect the ones closest to him, yet when he fails to do just that, his power becomes null with wrath. Wrath for his enemy, and wrath for the world that so readily perpetuates the cycle that spawned his grief. In that wrath he sought rebirth through pain. The pain he inflicts upon his enemies ricocheting right back at him. Even physical harm he once enacted upon others blighting him, his power literally binding his body, rendering it immobile. But it's only after reversing all the pain he had caused with his ocular gift that he is finally freed from his burden, using one grand jutsu so unlike the others in his repertoire, a jutsu that does not rob life, but restores it. This action granting resolution and union to foes so at odds. The Rinnegan is a power itself born from the union of Senju and Uchiha DNA, which in a world where these two clans are such bitter enemies, it's no wonder that both sides could not so easily discover that greater abilities were locked behind their cooperation. The origin story of this long-running conflict itself begins when one was bestowed gifts over another, the larger cut that the younger brother acquired ultimately amounting to nothing in the face of all the despair that preceded. And it's no wonder that Hagoromo could not foresee this happening, for it was his younger brother that so readily accepted an inferior position for the sake of maintaining peace. But that peace was never maintained on Earth nor the Moon. The Otsutsuki branch family used the power of the Tenseigan to enact their interpretation of Hamura's words, even eliminating the main family to see these words through. And on Earth, the roles were reversed, with the Hyuga clan's main family keeping the branch family chained down for their perceived betterment of the clan. They encaged the lower echelon to keep their secrets safe. Yet it is the very defiance of this authoritative position that not only kept the secrecy of their abilities intact, but maintained peace within their land. Hisashi's final adherence to his free will as a person is what ultimately benefits the Leaf, not adherence as a tool for his clan. But despite this fact, the Hyuga continued conforming to the same narrow dogma that is universal to the world. This stagnation breeding another cursed soul, Neji Hyuga. His Hyuga bloodline, his Kekkei Genkai, the Byakugan, it only represents all that he suffers from. Every move, every technique that is exclusive to his kind look like limitations to him. Yet he hypocritically always tried to defy those limitations forcibly placed on him, despite only ever talking about how one's fate is set, using the Chunin exams as an avenue to enact wrath upon the main family, and developing the rotation to spit in the face of their secret technique. Yet it was in the aftermath of his battle with Naruto that allowed him to look past his grief, and even later amend it. This new path he found, later enabling him to use his power productively, not for his sole benefit, but for the benefit of the one that once did so much for him. Neji's sacrifice mirroring his father's not only in its liberating beauty, but also in its beneficiality. Where Neji defies the old outdated ways of the Hyuga with his final action, Sasuke continued to use his clan's gifts to spread more grief, not just for others, but for himself. His passion for love, his passion for hatred, all projected in the color of his eyes, a striking red, the color of passion. Sasuke frequently feigns a cool head and aloof nature, but those eyes expose the profound emotions always rampant in his consciousness. It is these profound feelings that illuminate his greatest asset. It first bloomed to protect a comrade in peril, evolved further when forced to inflict harm on that same comrade, claimed ascension when his worst pain is realized, and reaches its greatest potential when Sasuke is more lost than he ever is before. So much power, yet only ever utilized at his own expense. But Sasuke could never see this, for the pride he has in this power blinds him of its blighting reality, his passionate pride for his clan's abilities on full display against Orochimaru. He comments on his disgust with Orochimaru's methodology to ascend, using many, toying with life. It is that desperate attempt to seek power by inflicting misery on many that leads to his downfall. Yet, this is not even the crux of Sasuke's detestment, his disgust lying mainly in an inferior specimen attempting to reach the same status as his clans. Sasuke denounces Orochimaru's feeble attempt as nothing more than wretched, even viewing Orochimaru's ambition as synonymous with Itachi's massacre in nature. But it is in his blind hatred, his immense pride for his own power, that he is unable to see how he mirrors the very person he despises most, crushing someone below him, mocking them for even attempting to contest all the while. Even Sasuke's comment on how all jutsu are meaningless before his eyes is the very same phrase Itachi once uttered to Orochimaru years ago. His eyes discerned Orochimaru's nature, discerned his ultimate technique, yet they could not discern the irony of his words, nor that even this event is one completely accounted for and dancing in the palm of his older brother's hands. A powerful tool that becomes too much for Orochimaru to handle, yet still being weaponized by another's manipulation. A weapon forged and sharpened to achieve a narrow goal. That power meaningless when the completion of that goal is revealed to be a facade. And during this journey of willingly submitting oneself to the status of a tool, Sasuke found himself face to face with a man who uses the tragedy that ignited his misery as a weapon against him. Through those eyes that could not change the fate of the ultimatum Danzo himself proposed, Danzo uses them to change his own, again and again. But ironically, it is not a massive influx of power from Sasuke's evolving Mangekyo that defeats Danzo, but instead, a basic genjutsu. Because for a man so confident in his ability to change the future, all Sasuke needed to do was disrupt the foundations that enabled that future to prosper. The advantage Danzo acquired at the expense of so many, ultimately becoming the lethal disadvantage that ends his ambition. But the aftermath of this battle saw even more baggage accompanied with Sasuke's genetic gifts, his power disabling him from seeing clearly. And even when that clarity returns, his vision becomes muddled yet again when Itachi lays his failures regarding Sasuke and the clan bare. All after using a jutsu so unlike anything Sasuke had ever seen before. A powerful jutsu, sacrificing the eye that cast it, not to benefit the caster, but to benefit the one it was casted on, quite similar to the Izanagi Danzo exploited, yet very different at the same time. One sacrificing power for the sake of the user, the other sacrificing power for the sake of the enemy. Where Sasuke so easily fooled his opponent using the knowledge he had of the fundamentals of Izanagi, Izanami is a jutsu that cannot be disrupted until the affected ceases to fool themselves. A jutsu very fittingly not only used against a man like Kabuto, but to be displayed to Sasuke, a man that, for quite some time now, has been incapable of looking at himself, despite his superior eyes that can see so much. Itachi used his clan's power as a tool to help propagate a path that not only diverged from them, but opposed all sides he cared for, even allying with someone who once used that very same power to attack the village he was trying to protect. This irony not rooted in a transition towards malevolence, but one born out of circumstance. Itachi was born gifted, not only being a prodigy amongst prodigies in terms of abilities, but having the intelligence and temperament of a wise man at the age of a child. His gifts enabled him to be an asset for anyone who needed him, but therein lies the problem, because both sides he cared for needed him in order to harm the other. His innate gifts ultimately led to suffering in the form of the most painful decision in the story, and that painful decision led to one more harmful blow that not only affected him, but the one he cared for the most. After using those eyes to manipulate his loved one, blinding him to any other diverging path, he becomes more and more blind to himself. His decaying vision brought upon by his eyes' abilities mirroring his struggle to see the error of his ways. He cryptically mocks Sasuke for his inability to truly see, Yet his Achilles heel is located in the very same vein, a man that only discovers his hypocrisy after death. But here, during the duration of his second chance, Itachi forgoes an aspect of power that he once used in an attempt to orchestrate the outcome that solely he desired, to create an outcome that benefits so many, even the enemy. And that decision not only aids him in his final words to Sasuke, but helps preserve his brother's life again, one that he has always sought to protect. Itachi's genius, his genetics, his abilities were always synonymous with the clan he had to annihilate, the clan he had to take away from his little brother, the decision he made for his clan that initiated his ultimate failure. Yet here, after casting a part of that power that made him so formidable aside, he is finally able to amend some of the mistakes that sprouted from his burden of genius all those years ago. But Obito could never. Power is what he seeks to reach the world he desires. Where Madara's abilities are exploited by Black Zetsu, so were Obito's inherent gifts exploited by Madara. Even after death, Obito carried on his will, becoming Madara himself, ascending further like his predecessor before him, that progress bearing immense weight on his shoulders, compelling him to seek more power just for the meager hope that his previous life can be retrieved, a life that was at its brightest when Obito was still a talentless loser among his clan's prodigies. And on this new journey after abandoning incompetency, he comes face to face with a remnant of his previous power. Power that didn't mean anything if it couldn't protect. Power inherited by another. It was through that eye that Rin was saved, and it was also through that eye that she was slain. Where that eye enabled Kakashi to do what his comrade had once done for him, it also later became a liability for Madara to exploit. And all of Obito is exploited at the end of his road. But in turn, Madara's final ascension is exploited as well, the users ultimately becoming the used. The showcase of these two writhing in the blood of betrayal in this final arc, paralleling the same phenomenon in the very first arc of the story. Haku used by Zabuza, Zabuza used by Gato, all parties suffering consequences ending in death. Yet, at the end of his road, Zabuza defies the cyclical nature of shinobi, not only retrieving his dormant humanity, but inspiring a boy that would one day inspire the whole world. The end of this conflict seeing the creation of the Great Naruto Bridge. A bridge connecting a path from one side to another, a fitting name based on a man longing to connect two conflicting sides with a bridge called understanding. And here, that same man comes face to face with a form of a once human that seeks to understand no one. A rebirthed goddess who was once above all, standing atop those who portrayed their vast array of emotions in their eyes. Kaguya's eyes gleam resoundingly hollow. A clear objective, a clear consciousness, no mental fatigue, no emotional baggage, and most importantly, overwhelming power. A perfect shinobi in every way, the ultimate tool. Wars, shinobi, people, all propelled into conflict by her minion. All of this despair, just so she can once again lay claim to everything. To the source of all power. No partners, no comrades, only what can be used or discarded. If they seek strength, they are an enemy. If they seek refuge with her, they are an asset. Yet it is through her one exception to this hollow nature, her sons, that she is defeated once again. The only residual human emotion that she perceives herself to be so above is the very thing that eventually leads to her final demise. Not through resistance of a superior magnitude, but of marginal powers that ultimately amount to more with cooperation. Their cooperation only being this viable due to the emotional bonds linking these characters. And the same message is resonant in the final confrontation of the series. Exploitation of the tailed beasts, cooperation with the tailed beasts, the latter coming out on top. Not through extinguishing life with force, but by using his words, as he had done time and time before. Naruto inched closer and closer towards his goal by looking at his opponents, while Sasuke became more and more misguided by always looking through them. Even when the herald of his newfound power asks him to watch the end of a fellow reincarnation that walked down a similar path of failure, Sasuke only finds fault with Madara, condemning him for his use of the tailed beasts, when he hypocritically would use them the very same way, using their power to create a world even more fictitious than his ancestors. He cannot see where his road would inevitably lead. He cannot see why Naruto always seems so far ahead of him, even when their powers are so evenly matched. He cannot see because he cannot understand. And of course he wouldn't, because he never tried to understand in the first place. always looking at resistance as an obstacle and nothing more, when he could have seen so much of himself in that opposition had he only looked. The only time Naruto followed this same methodology against an opponent, he prevailed, only to have that victory linger with a taste of defeat shortly after. The ability he earned following that short-lived road becoming more of a liability than an asset. Yet, it was in his very next major confrontation that he was able to use his ability without drawback, an advantage he earned after receiving motivation from the past. Where Sasuke's words are rooted in the future for the sake of the future, Naruto's words are rooted in the past for the sake of the future. Sasuke would cast away the world's past, because it was that past that blessed Sasuke with combative gifts, only to watch idly as he suffered from them. The same with Naruto, the only difference being that burden has found union with him through reconciliation. Reconciliation that was only achieved by facing his past. And here, after Sasuke fails to take down Naruto with sheer might, he is forced to remember his own, forced to reconcile with a past where he used his gifts in all the wrong ways. It is not Naruto's equal force that cures Sasuke's ailment of power, his genetic burden, but Naruto's abilities when he's at his physically weakest state. Abilities called tenacity, perseverance, endurance, understanding. 2 men, a fraction of their power lost by the end of this battle, yet coming away from this conflict greater shinobi still. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a nice thumbs up. Helps me reach new people. And if you enjoy this type of content and are new, consider subscribing so I'm in your feed. My Naruto videos in particular are starting to gain a bit of traction, so as I've said before, I'm focusing my attention on Naruto for now until I run out of compelling ideas. I plan on making a Discord, and even a Patreon for those who are interested. I'll have it all set up soon and reveal the links come next upload. Speaking of the next upload, it's going to be a sort of extension of this video where I go more in depth on Madara, Obito, and Tobirama in particular. So if you felt me discussing their resolutions was missing here, fret not because I have thought of that as well. It's just the more elaborate things I have to say about them don't really fit in with the topic of this video. So please, look forward to that. Okie doke, that's about it. Spice Boy out.